Right, well, Grand Prix Manchester's all done and dusted. It's a wrap, and we're back here in the bar, enjoying our sort of victory drinks, as it were. And would you believe it? In the same hotel as Rob Alexander. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you.
All the better for finally getting some drink in you. You've had some long days, right?
Always do with these shows.
Oh, that feels so good. Anyway, I thought it was really interesting to have a chat to you because it's been quite a few years since we talked last time. I'm trying to think of the event and it kind of escapes me.
I think it was Amsterdam, which was the the 10th anniversary of when they'd been running the GPs. So it's been a bit.
Yeah, I remember why it escapes me, and that's because there was a lot of whiskey involved that weekend because Wizards were paying for it all, if I remember.
You're not suggesting there might have been too much.
But you know, we got so many interesting things to talk about. I mean, I particularly wanted to focus on how tough it is, really, in the art industry nowadays. Because you're obviously established, right? But there seems to be so many artists up and coming. It's like, how would you break into the industry sort of nowadays if you were 17 years old all over again?
You're talking about getting into magic specifically, or just overall getting into the industry in general?
I think, first of all, just trying to survive in the industry, you know, because, I mean, that seems to be the first thing, to actually just afford to be able to live and then sort of expand into what it is you want to do.
It's actually not that difficult in many ways to get started in this relative to anything else. I mean, there is no career I can think of where you step out of school and people just start throwing jobs and money at you. You've always got to work at it hard, work your way up. This field is no different. With the possible exception that this is the one field I've come across where everybody who's already working in it and established tends to be incredibly helpful and supportive of anybody that's coming up that's new. I mean, you know, myself, anybody else, we see an awful lot of people coming into the field. Now, there's an awful lot of them that, you know, not to sound negative or anything, but you know, it looks like they're somebody that just really haven't put in that much time or that much effort or whatever it is that they need to do, whether it's going through school or whether they're self-taught. But then you see somebody who's obviously very talented, nice person, you know, easy to get along with, and any one of us will sort of take them under the wing for a little bit, give them, you know, introductions, give them advice, give them, you know, some pointers on how to get started or how to fine-tune their portfolio or who they might want to talk to, because we've all been there. You know, whether you've been in the industry for a couple of years or a couple of decades, you know, it doesn't seem like that long since we were all sort of trying to find our first job and figure out, you know, what to do and how to go about doing it. And everybody that I know of, you know, when I was getting into it, we talked to the people that were already established, and you know, I had a lot of help from a lot of folks when I was getting into this, both, you know, the industry in general and getting into magic. So all of that just sort of, you know, you pay it back as you go forward. So everybody that I can think of as an artist would, you know, if I was at a show and somebody came up with a portfolio and the work in there was just, oh my God, this is stunning, you really need to talk to, you know, this art director or that art director, or hey, I happen to know that this person has got a project coming up in the next 6 months and this work looks like it would be absolutely perfect for that. So you'll just go ahead and you'll make an introduction. And the neat thing about this, and I suppose one reason why we're so willing to do it, is the artwork is so unique and individual. I mean, that's the one thing that you can't replace, is that artist's unique vision of whether it's the world, the assignment, you know, whatever it is. So, you know, if I introduce, you know, myself and another person to an art director, at the end of the day, the art director needs to make the choice for the project of the artist that is the best person for that project. So if somebody else gets the job instead of me, it doesn't really feel like they've taken work away from me because they were the right choice. I was not the right choice. All that does is free me up to go find something else or some other job where I am the right choice, and then each of us ends up with work. So it makes it much easier for everybody that's already in the industry to actively support and encourage new people coming in, because there really is room for everybody. You know, and these days, I don't know whether it's because of the internet or the globalization or just the prevalence of, you know, instruction, whether it's, you know, through, you know, YouTube videos or, you know, things that you can find online, access to Photoshop and to Painter and to all the computer rendering programs that are out there. But I don't remember being anywhere near that good when I came out of art college, but I'm looking sometimes at things that I'm seeing online or at, CG Hub or DeviantArt or places like that where some of these people that are first starting out, I'm like, oh, well, that took me 10 years to get to where, these people are starting from. So, again, that just kind of compresses the whole learning curve for people, and I think it would make it much, much easier for any of these people to come out and have, a really good shot at starting to get some work. Now, that being said, you're also entering into a field where art directors already have a stable of people large enough to meet their needs by and large with the folks that they've already been working with. So you've got to have something in there that stands out and makes you look different from the people that are already, being regularly and steadily employed in the field. So,
okay.
So how do you tend to talk?
There's no problems at all. How do you know what you're worth?
You're talking monetarily?
Because that's got to be the hardest thing for a sort of 17, 18-year-old who's coming in and he's offered his first job to... I mean, at what point do you go, okay, I want to have exposure, but then, of course, you go, if you're broke, I mean, no amount of exposure is going to help you, right?
Right, and I mean, at the end of the day, the rent does still need to be paid, and you've got to eat. But that being said, there is a combination of an awful lot of information that's available both in print and online about what the industry standard rates are for, whether it's a page in a comic book or, an hourly rate for a concept artist or, a book jacket illustration or whatever it is that you're doing. There are a lot of information resources that you can go to, and you can find out what are people being regularly paid. People come up to me quite often and ask me, well, as a magic art artist, what are you being paid? And we don't keep it a big secret, and therefore everybody, even if you're somebody that's entering into it, you'll know, okay, this is what magic pays. Maybe it's $1,000 for these cards, and they're the gaming company that's got enough money to be able to do that. And then you can say, okay, and then there's these other half a dozen companies that are still producing viable product, but not anywhere near the scale and budget that Wizards and Hasbro are able to produce magic. So they're offering you, $100 or $200 a card. They're not trying to lowball you. That's what they're paying everybody. And maybe that is where you end up doing your first number of cards if that's what you were wanting to be doing. But at least going into it, that, what the salary possibility or expectations are. And yeah, everybody seems to end up sort of equalizing in that. It's not an industry, by and large, where for things like that, they will underpay somebody because they're new or it's their first card. I mean, if it's your first card for Wizards, you're going to get paid the same amount that I'm getting paid because that's just the only fair way to handle it.
If they decide you're good enough, right?
Well, exactly. Now if you get into, advertising art or something like that, which can also still be, considered part of the same industry, there is much more of a sliding scale there. You have people that have a reputation that is sort of stellar, and they're going to absolutely command top dollar. And then there's the people that are just coming in, maybe fresh out of school, or they've only been doing this for a few years. You can't expect to get nearly the same salary as somebody that's been doing this for 20 years, doing that, or whether it's on a salary basis or on a per piece or a per hour rate. But with that, there's on the other hand, there's more opportunity to work your way up and to establish yourself essentially as a brand or as something that can be marketed, or as somebody that's got a very established look. I think of sometimes people doing movie posters and whatnot. Drew Struzan, for example, is sort of as a movie, whether it's a producer or a director or an actor, if they get Drew Struzan to do your movie poster, the studio has faith in this movie because, he will get top dollar, but that's because he is incredibly good at what he does, has been for a long time. There are other movies that, they sort of expect to hopefully make back what the movie cost, but you can tell that they're not putting an awful lot in above and beyond that, so you don't get Drew Struzan doing your movie poster, But either which way, there is just an awful lot of information, aside from what you can just go up and talk to any of the other artists about, whether it's, like I said, online or in print books that are, established guidelines of what fair and reasonable rates are for the various types of work that you might want to do.
Now, while you're waiting for sort of those first jobs to come in, how do you go about sort of monetizing your skills? What sort of ways can an artist sort of sell themselves, either through commissions or prints, things like that?
Those are a couple of good points for there. Commissions definitely, prints definitely. There are some places, I believe, online where you can showcase your work and have essentially a print-on-demand service that's provided by the host of those images, so people can peruse through that. If they find something they like, click a couple of buttons, they'll get a printout that they can call and keep and call their own, and you'll get a commission off of that. I think the question may be a little bit too broad. I think as an artist you'd want to take a look at what you're doing, what your strengths are visually, where you want to be going, what industry do I want to be working in, and then sit down and say, okay, where am I at? Where do I want to go? How big is that gulf? How do I bridge that gulf? What do I need to do? Is the work already of a quality level that could be noticed? In which case it's a matter of getting in front of the right people, getting your portfolio put together, maybe polishing up a few pieces. If there's a couple of things that look like they might be the weak links, you don't want that, because you're going to be judged on the worst piece in your portfolio. Because at the end of the day, the art director looking at it, they've got to be able to say, bottom line, what is the minimum that I can expect from this person? If they're having a really bad day, they're, everything in the rest of their life is falling apart, what is the bare minimum I can expect to receive from them? That will be the worst piece in your portfolio. Of course, they're crossing their fingers and hoping if they give you the job that this is the week that everything went well for you, and you just knock one out of the park and they get more than they would have expected or had any right to expect. And of course, they're going to be super happy with that. But that's not a prediction that they can comfortably make. What they've got to come into it, bottom line, is on your worst day, can you still give me something that I can use? So, maybe all you need to be doing is polishing up your portfolio. Maybe, like I know in my case, when I was first looking at wanting to get into this seriously, my problem was that my work was vastly inferior to the people who were already doing the jobs that I wanted to be able to compete with. So I had to sit down and find ways to bridge that skill and technical level gap that was there. With other people, it may simply be that they're approaching some of the wrong markets. They're, this is what I want to be doing, but this is what's in my portfolio. Or I've had a number of portfolio reviews where the people had skill in a wide range of styles and subjects and therefore outlets or games or companies that they could possibly work for, but they were so different in what their artistic needs would be that by trying to put together one portfolio that could simultaneously work for young children's games and magic games and book jackets and something out of the video game industry and something for advertising, it looked more like a scattershot. And as an art director looking through, I would have been seeing a variety of looks and styles and approaches, and I wouldn't be sure what I would have gotten had I given this person an assignment. So, I look at these portfolios sometimes and I'll tell people, okay, what do you really want to do? And if the answer is I really want to do any one of these 3 or 4 completely different, categories or markets, and I'm equally skilled in all of them, well, then you're going to need 3 or 4 distinct portfolios, because what you send somebody for your children's book and children's magazine illustrations is not what you're going to send to Blizzard for World of Warcraft. There's just not enough crossover there, and they need to be able to see something that already leans heavily into the direction of what they're going without looking like it's simply a regurgitation of what they've already got on their plate to begin with.
So, I know you've got some interesting projects going on at the moment back at home. Maybe you want to have a quick chat about some of those. So you got some big wall things going on, I guess is a technical term, right?
Excuse me. How about very large painting? Actually, it's a piece that I've been working on for a while. It's almost finished now. It's for a museum opening up, I believe, in Las Vegas. They're having their grand opening the July 4th weekend. It's going to be a large, it's called FantasyCon. It's going to be a large fantasy extravaganza. Looking at the guest list, I'd say probably half the stars from the Hobbit movie have been invited and confirmed. I believe at last tally they were expecting approximately 40,000 people to show up, which blows my mind because this is the inauguration both of the museum and of the FantasyCon festival itself. To get that kind of a turnout at your first opening, your first event, I can't think of another show that has ever managed to pull that off. Admittedly, I'm not super familiar with all of them, but those are staggering numbers for something that, I remember, some years ago talking to the Josh Patel, the person that was setting this all up, And it was, at that point, nothing more than a, gee, down the road someday it would be fun to set this thing up and maybe see it come to fruition. And now, what seems to me just a very short time period later, we're fast approaching opening day, and he has managed to, I think, exceed anybody's wildest expectations with all this. I'm not sure how he's managed to do it, but my hat is off to him. So anyway, what he's put together, aside from the whole convention itself, is a very large body of work from an awful lot of the best in the industry right now for science fiction and fantasy people. And for a number of us, he selected basically what he wanted to call a masterworks piece. We would sit and talk about a commission and do a very large painting, which would basically be the anchor around which the collection of that artist's work would be assembled and displayed for the show. So he's acquired quite a number of my pieces, including an awful lot of the most iconic ones from Magic. And the piece I'm working on, it's sort of a take on the theme of the Sanctum of Sarah and the Urza's Plains pieces, which were really, really popular, and it's ended up turning into a canvas that's 5 feet by 8 feet and has been so much fun to work on. So I haven't had a chance since the odd store mural or something like that I've done which on a really large scale. I think the last time I was able to work on a really large piece was back in college, and it wasn't quite as big, and it was certainly not nearly as good. So that has been, for somebody that's sort of been wanting an excuse to really get whole hog back into more traditional painting, it's been everything I could have dreamed for.
I mean, you mentioned that word traditional. I know, like, when the internet came out and this sort of switch over to digital happened, you know, some of the artists picked up on it very quickly. You know, I used to do a lot of art trading like years ago, and I used to go up to an artist and say, have you got any originals? And they're like, I'm a purely digital artist. And you kind of had that little tinge of regret and stuff like that. But, you know, I'm just wondering how you sort of feel about the sort of the digital versus the physical, I guess.
When it first started to come out and first started to gain any sort of borderline recognition and acceptance, I was completely against it, because it seemed to me like it wasn't really real art. And I think a lot of that came out of my ignorance of the process more than anything else. These days, you know, obviously it's here to stay. It's an accepted tradition, and I think also we have now gotten through the time period where people were experimenting with, you know, say software that would start automatically rendering and generating an awful lot of the imagery for you. And we've gotten further and further away from that, and more into it simply being yet another tool, not really in a fundamental way that much different from a paintbrush or, you know, an airbrush or anything else. It does what you tell it to do, and yes, there are some slick tricks that you can pull off in Photoshop. There are some things I can do in Painter in a couple of seconds that would take me considerably longer to do with traditional media. But, you know, at the end of the day, if you don't know what you're doing with it, it can make something ugly look slightly less ugly, but, you know, Photoshop on its own isn't going to fix your composition. It's not going to fix your colors. It's not going to show you how to tell a dramatic story or paint a character that looks interesting and engaging, or that is clearly communicating to the audience what it is that you're trying to say. So it won't do it for you, and it won't make you a good artist. But my God, it's fast and sleek and sexy and seductive. And you know, some of the people that I know that have done it, you know, they've made a transition because of, you know, purely physical needs and demands, or, you know, developed allergies and sensitivities to traditional media after years of exposure to it. Some people simply prefer the speed and the allure of it. You know, there are fields like concept art for video games where you pretty much have to do everything in Photoshop or Painter or something, just because of the speed at which the industry works and demands, and the ability to go in and make changes and variations and you know, chop this and that up and put them together in different patterns. You know, what I can do in a morning with Photoshop in that would take me a week to do by hand. You know, so there's just no way around using it from that perspective. But
it's great listening to you, because obviously you were back in 2006 when we were in Paris, of course, at the Magic Gathering World Championships. You were a lot angrier about some of this stuff back then, because that was when it was just coming in. Yeah,
exactly. And like I said, I resisted it for a long time, and it was not too long after that time period where I ended up having, you know, a situation where I was, you know, suddenly expanding my career into doing concept work, starting to have to experiment with and teach myself, you know, more about this. And that's when I started to realize, okay, you know, if I don't know what I'm doing. The computer won't do it for me. And then suddenly you gain a little more respect because now you've, as they say, walked a mile in someone else's shoes. So, okay, this is what they're going through. This is what they've had to fight through in terms of gaining any respect and acceptance of this in the first place. And then you start looking at, okay, well, just like there are things I can do with oil paint that I can't really pull off in watercolor and vice versa, are there some things I can do that aren't just fakery, trickery, and shortcuts in Photoshop, but actually taking advantage of the characteristics of that media versus any other media? And instead of trying to make it, just a quick and easy way of reproducing what I would do with a paintbrush and oil, what can I do in Photoshop, or what can I do in Painter that are specific and endemic just to those tools? And it's kind of push and have some fun with that, and then, yeah, suddenly you say, oh, okay, maybe that doesn't suck.
So you mentioned before about your iconic art. I thought we could, in fact, touch on a couple of those. What do you consider, certainly either popularity-wise, because I know sometimes it's kind of awkward when an artist makes something that they consider, oh, this is going to be popular, and it isn't, and then something that they just sort of churned out in a night suddenly blows up and becomes something amazing, right? I mean, what do you consider to be, either your best pieces or your most iconic pieces?
I think we have to start with Underground Sea just because of its tenure. I mean, it's a piece that's, it's over 20 years old now. First Magic card I ever painted, something that I did before I understood really how the game worked. They were still in the process of writing the rules as they were trying to explain to me how the game played. So I ended up just doing a piece that made me happy and brought in a lot of the artistic sensibilities and aesthetics and characteristics that I found appealing, looking back through art history, looking at the artists I respected and admired. How do I bring some of that into my own body of work? And that was the result. I mean, yeah, you compare it to my work these days and it looks a little clunky and crude, but that whole aesthetic sensibility still holds true, and I think that's one reason that the piece still has as much appeal as it does. Although there's no arguing the fact that it also just happens to fit in with the card mechanics and be a very, very playable card from that perspective. So that is certainly I would say my most iconic image. Let's see, certainly a couple of the pieces I am the proudest of. Temple Garden from Ravnica. I mean, the whole Ravnica Dual Land cycle, all 10 pieces, I was incredibly satisfied with and proud of, still am. But
I want to say just here that it's amazing that you got all of those 10 pieces.
Well, I wasn't supposed to. It was actually kind of interesting because, following the way things are assigned, I got 4 of those in the first major block, and then there were going to be 3 and 3. And of the 4 in the first block, 2 specifically said dual lands, and 2 did not in the art description. So I thought, okay, they're bringing back dual lands, good for them. I got 2 of them. Well, beggars can't be choosers. And I got 2 other non-basic but non-dual lands. So, well, at least they'll get some play as well. And then after I turned in the sketches and was talking to the art director, oh, no, all 4 of them are dual lands. We just, oh, okay. And then, as I understand it from talking to the art director at the time was Jeremy Cranford, once I turned in those first 4, they kind of looked at them and went, wow, okay, so he gets the other 6 because I can't think of anybody else we can give them to that's going to do as good a job, and we don't want to risk somebody coming in and screwing them up. So, yeah, my understanding is I was not originally slated to get all 10, but, yeah, having turned in the first 4, they decided there's only one way to finish this dance. So, there we are.
Now, how important is your website in sort of as a making you money, getting a bit of income? I thought we'd talk a little bit, wrap this sort of up, with you sort of your online portfolio and how people can go about sort of buying your artwork, things like that, if they're interested.
Okay. Let's see. Well, first off, the website is robalexander.com. After all those years of working under my own name, it seemed kind of silly to have a website with anything other than my name. In terms of getting me, visibility and an actual income right now, it plays a pretty minor role, to be honest. On the other hand, I don't babysit it. I don't push it anywhere near what it's capable of. I frankly would rather spend more of my time in the studio, and at this point I'm happy to just kind of leave it out there. There are slow but steady sales from that. I mean, every month I'm selling things through the print shop and whatnot. But it's been interesting. What I've found is in terms of online. I can have that, and it's more of a, well, like just a constant place people can go and look at and find my work. I don't rely on it for sales. I don't even necessarily rely on it for visibility, and yet then I'll have the same, essentially the same portfolio that you can see on my website will be on, for example, my LinkedIn page. Now I get a completely different crowd looking at that, and I will, get regular requests from, job recruiters or companies. Hey, saw your work on there. I know you're actively engaged in X, Y, or Z right now, but would you be open to discussing job opportunity W with us? Well, sure, why not? I mean, yeah, it's nice to know what's out there. So there's that same body of work, those same images in a different digital outlet that's providing a very different end result. And I mean, I'm not making money on that per se. I certainly don't sell anything off of that page, but, we've got that. And then I've got the, things that are on Facebook, for example. I've got both the page I started, and I guess you'd call it a fan page that somebody else has started that I still has got a lot of my images on it. People will periodically post things to, and I'm not a big social media person per se. I'm a very private person, so if I want to tell you something, I'll hunt you up and I will tell you. I'm not going to just post it to the world and hope that at some point you trip across it, because that's not the point of communication for me, and I'm not terribly interested in sharing everything that I do on that global a scale. So again, I'm not really making any attempt to utilize social media the way it could be used, but even within that, I still get, an awful lot of requests for, whether it's for information about appearances or questions on, artwork that somebody has seen, as often as not, in spite of the fact that there are email links, readily available on the website, somebody will go to the website, see an image or an original painting that they like, and then message me on Facebook, about, how much is it available, can I inquire with you? So I'm just, I suppose by trying to cover all those bases, at least minimally, it gives people access so that however they want to approach me for whatever reason, they can do it in a way that's comfortable for them.
So what you're saying, we're not going to see your art on a T-shirt or a thong or something like that, or a mug?
What would be the point? I suppose part of it is simply because of my old school traditional approach and things like that. I do recognize it's a business. It has to be self-sustaining and all of that, but at the same time, I am most happy and most comfortable, sitting in the studio with a paintbrush and a cup of tea and just sit down and do what I want to do. I can see down the road certainly transitioning into having, I suppose for lack of a better word, an account manager, somebody that will be maintaining these things, certainly over the last decade, making efficient use of things like social media. I don't even have a Twitter account, but if I did, if I had a regular blog, if I could just sit down and chat to somebody and say, okay, this is kind of what's going on, this is what I'm working on, here's a few photos of things, you go post all this stuff on all these media sites and make it happen. I can see transitioning more into that direction, but not with me actively at the helm. I think frankly it's just too much of a time demand, and why don't we let people that are good at that take care of that, and why don't I do what I'm good at? Finally,
Wizard of the Coast obviously been ridiculously good to you. I mean, you're here in Manchester, and I think this is your second trip to the UK. I think you maybe did something 10, 15 years ago. Let's talk about some of just your favourite places in the world that they've sent you.
Oh, God. I mean, first off, I love to travel, and you're absolutely right. Wizards, somebody's been asked numerous times over this weekend what it's been like, and my answer has always been, it's a 20-year carnival ride. It has really been incredible, completely unexpected and unpredictable, and so much fun. And I love to travel. I love to meet people. I grew up playing Dungeons & Dragons, watching every bad fantasy movie and television show I could find back then. If Magic had been around when I was in high school, I would have played that. I would have come out here to these tournaments. I play the game very badly, but I love the game. So this is my geeky kind of crowd. So coming out to these shows in general for me is incredibly rewarding and enjoyable. So if I put
best location though, I mean, it can't be Europe. It's got to be like South America or something, or maybe Japan or something like that, if you've done that.
See, now, okay, can we do top 5?
Sure, we can do top 5.
Certainly.
Do you want to start 1 at 5?
We'll do them in a random order to be revealed later. Japan, awesome. I mean, aside from, a fascination, like an awful lot of people with, the Japanese history and culture and all of that, amazing food, incredibly, fun, vibrant place to visit. so different and yet so open and friendly and inviting at the same time. So I will thank God for Ron Foster and native guides and translators. So
I know John Avon, I spoke to him briefly, and he went to Japan. I don't know if he was at the same event that you was, but he said the queues for the card signings were ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, as polite as you could possibly wish for, but yes, incredibly long queues and, busy weekends. I remember doing a show in Taipei as well, which was an amazing experience. Again, a different culture from Japan, different culture from Canada, the U.S., Europe. So that was an incredible experience. Personally, I have really enjoyed the shows that I've done in Australia. Everybody there was just so damn friendly and relaxed and happy to be there. I kept saying, if you go to Australia and you're not having a good time, it's probably because you're putting a lot of effort into not having a good time. And then the first few times I was there, I was lucky enough to be able to fly home via New Zealand, go down to Weta Studios, so that whole thing is tied in there with me. So, because I mean, I've been a Lord of the Rings fan since I was in second grade, so getting a chance to go down there while they were working on the movies, visit the studios, hang out, get to meet all the artists down there. I mean, they set up a work table for me and made me at home for a couple of days while I was in the city, and I couldn't have asked for a better experience with that. Mexico, oddly enough, again, friendly, open, exciting. There's a lot of times I go to these shows, say in Europe, and a lot of people will come up and take my photo, and it's all so that they can post it on Facebook and Instagram and all of that. So, it's fun, and I'm glad they're sharing it, and I'm glad they're having a good time. I got just as many photos of me taken in Mexico, and I can't think of any of them that really got posted to Facebook. It was all people's personal recollections and memorabilia, and yeah, as soon as I showed up there, you're pretty much just automatically adopted into the family because they're just so genuinely happy to have you there and whatnot. And I mean, having grown up in North America, the European shows, Europe for us is still the exotic country. I mean, I talk to people over here, they want to go visit exotic places like Toronto and San Francisco and New York. I'm like, oh, fine if you want, but I've been to better places. Trust me, they're all in Europe. So it's simply a matter of perspective and what one gets access to and what one doesn't. I mean, I think I've been to Paris 5 or 6 times. I'm still in love with the city. I have an awesome time every time I go there. I love the food. I love the culture. I speak enough of the language to at least go get myself into trouble. So, those are some of the places that I really have appreciated. Getting a chance to go to, thanks to Wizards.
I mean, you said Paris. I mean, 2006. You got your art in the Louvre.
Exactly. Come on. And I didn't even have to die. How many people can say their art hung in the Louvre during their lifetime?
For those who don't know, the actual 2006 Nationals was held in the Louvre, and it's got a really unique presence being in there, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yes, we were in the basement. It's not like they're hanging my stuff up there next to the the Da Vinci's and Vermeers but I was in the building. I had my artwork on display in the Louvre. So yeah, that was an amazing experience.
And the food was pretty good as well.
It's France. Come on, if you can't find good food in France, you're not paying attention.
Anyway, Rob, this has been a great chat. I think this has been a good spot to sort of wrap this up. I think we've got pretty much everything covered. Any last comments?
No, I don't think so. Just thank you very much for having me and giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about my life.
And, let's keep on drinking. So,
okay.
Cheers.
Cheers.